welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
The top business stories live from Sky News' headquarters. The Bank of England warns of economic uncertainty ahead as it keeps interest rates on hold for now. Are outdated ethical standards holding back the UK's investment in defence? Plus, Lamborghini announces record results and says that Donald Trump's tariffs could mean tough times ahead for the motor industry. A very good afternoon on this Thursday, Business Live. With me, Darren McCaffrey. The Governor of the Bank of England has warned that there is a lot of economic uncertainty as his Monetary Policy Committee voted to keep interest rates on hold at 4.5%. The MPC said that Donald Trump's tariffs had added to global uncertainty since its last meeting. Andrew Bailey said that despite that, UK interest rates remained on a gradually declining path.
Inflation has come down from the very high levels we had a few years ago, and that's obviously encouraging. But we're seeing quite a gradual fall in inflation, and we have to obviously look forward at all times. We think there's going to be continued gradual fall in inflation. We're going to get a bit of a pickup during the rest of this year, but we have to be quite careful at this point in how we calibrate our response, because we're still seeing a very gradual fall in inflation. So we need to obviously accumulate the evidence, and we hope that's going to continue. That's our central expectation, but we really do have to wait to see that evidence unfold. We are certainly now in a world of even greater uncertainty. I'm always conscious that with central banks, we're always accused of saying the world's uncertain, but it really is uncertain. And there are, I think, two parts to this story. One is, of course, the impact of trade measures and tariffs themselves. That's one part of the story. And the second part is, of course, the uncertainty about what exactly is going to happen before you get, in a sense, to the question of the impact of it. And you see this in financial markets, so we've seen an increase in financial market volatility. Now, we're still waiting to see what really does happen, because this is frankly a fairly fast-moving story, as you'll know from reporting it, obviously. And the thing I'll say again, is two parts to this. First of all, I think we must all seek to avoid a fragmentation of the world economy. That is, that free trade, that is a bad thing. Secondly, the inflation impact of tariffs, when you're sort of, in a sense, on the receiving end of them, is quite ambiguous, as we've said before, and I'll say again. There are things that could push elements of this story that could push it up, and there are elements that could push it down.
As the Governor of the Bank of England speaking a little earlier, let's bring in our business and economics correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, who is live for us this afternoon. And today was as expected, if you like.
That's right. I think if there's one thing that's certain from what Andrew Bailey said, it's that there's a lot of economic and policy uncertainty at the moment. And there are a number of global headwinds that are facing the UK economy, headwinds from abroad, global headwinds, but also headwinds at home. And the Bank of England is having to weigh that up, which has muddied the water a little bit for the path of interest rates. I think the decision itself, 4.5%, the members of the Monetary Policy Committee, the rate setting committee, voted to keep interest rates on hold, wasn't that surprising. What was interesting was the vote split. The vote was far more definitive than we were expecting. 8 members of the committee opted to keep rates on hold, and only 1 chose to cut interest rates. And I think what that suggests is that fears about inflation are really niggling away at members of the Monetary Policy Committee, and that's one part of the equation that they take into account when setting interest rates, the inflation growth equation. And typically when inflation is high, you want to ratchet up interest rates to bring it down. But when growth in the economy is weak, you want to cut interest rates to try and spur some economic growth. The problem is both of those are going in opposite directions, which makes it hard for policymakers to to determine the best course of action. So on the economy front, well, the latest economic data we've had has painted a pretty bleak picture. The economy contracted at the beginning of the year. The jobs market has been cooling. And although we got some labour market data out today, which suggests that decline is now stabilising, the jobs market is stabilising. When Rachel Reeves' national insurance contribution increases kick in April, well, that slowdown in the jobs market could accelerate. And then, of course, there's Trump's trade war, global trade war, that could have ramifications for UK growth as well, although it's not really certain how that will play out, as you heard from Andrew Bailey just there. So this is typically an environment in which policymakers would want to start cutting interest rates. It's a weak economic environment. Yet, if we look at the inflation side of the equation, well, inflation is above target. It came in at 3% last month, and wages are rising even faster, pushing 6%. And although the Bank of England expects some of that to be temporary, it did warn today that there are some niggling fears that short-term inflationary rise could prove sustained. It could manifest itself through something called second-round effects. It also raised concerns again about the supply-side capacity of the economy, effectively the ceiling on our ability to grow without generating price pressures in the economy, without generating more inflation. The bank said if there were signs that was becoming more sustained, it wouldn't hesitate to keep interest rates higher for longer. So they're the sort of things that the Bank of England is weighing up, as well as Trump's trade war. We talked a little bit about what kind of impact that might have on the growth outlook. But as you heard from Andrew Bailey there, it's also really highly uncertain what kind of impact it might have on inflation. While we're not in Trump's direct firing line, we have been hit with some tariffs, but we've largely escaped his full fury. Ours is a relatively small, globally integrated economy, meaning that we could easily catch a cold if there's a global downturn. So there's a lot of things the Bank of England is weighing up and a huge amount of uncertainty. We still don't know how the fallout of the next increases is going to play out. We've got a spring statement coming up that could include tax rises and spending cuts. What kind of impact will that have on the growth outlook? And we don't know how different countries' trade policies are going to settle. And I think all of that explains why the Bank of England is proceeding with caution.
Gurpreet, thank you very much indeed. Gurpreet now on there live with that monetary policy decision from the Bank of England. Now, these are certainly uncertain times for the motor industry. The switch to electric, falling demand in China, and now the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs. The Italian luxury car maker Lamborghini is the latest to warn of potential trouble ahead. But things are looking pretty good for that company right now, having just reported record results for 2024, with operating profits up 15.5% to €835 million. Well, I speak to Stefan Wilkelman. He is Lamborghini's chief executive and joins us this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. A very positive year in terms of deliveries, results and profits. You must be pretty happy.
Yes, I am indeed. It's a good day, and it was a perfect year, the year 2024, because we had a record high in turnover with almost 3.1 billion euros, with 835 million operating profit and wonderful 20% of ROS, and also an all-time high in terms of deliveries of 10,687 cars, by keeping in mind that we never push for the peaks. We have a very solid order bank, which is lasting. If you buy a Lamborghini now, you get it in 1.5 years, which is very positive, because exclusivity, scarcity is one of the elements of our business. And this is also good because the residual values of the used cars are very often above the price of a new one.
And that price, let's talk about it, because frankly, let's be honest about this, most people watching this programme, myself included, probably couldn't afford one. How cheap can you get a Lamborghini for these days?
There is no fantasy world in our environment. So we have a clear positioning of the brand. We have very high investments because we have the complexity on one hand side of the luxury business, but on the other side, we have also the complexity of a car manufacturer. So very high investments, long life cycles, homologations all around the globe, emission regulations, which are very different in a lot of countries. So we have to be extra careful when we invest into the future. And in fact, now we had the biggest investment in the history of Lamborghini because we renewed all of our lineup. So all the 3 cars now are plug-in hybrids, and we are the first luxury or super sports car manufacturer to do so. And we are having very good results all around the globe. And I have to tell you that, for example, the UK is one of our most important markets as number 2 in Europe and number 4 worldwide. So it's very important for us to have a good performance in the UK.
But the biggest market is, of course, the United States. I think 3,000 units last year. And this comes at a time, doesn't it, in which there's the prospect of tariffs and the impact that could have. What impacts, if they are imposed, would it have on your business?
We are working now on different scenarios. There are 2 numbers now which are called, but it's a bit too early now to understand what is going to happen. We will see, but we are prepared for the different scenarios, and then we will act accordingly.
And just in terms of that impact, you know, supply chains, as you've just talked about there, are complex, they are globalized, they span different countries, sometimes different continents. Do you think we're now potentially moving into an era in which car manufacturers like yourselves have to think about that more, potentially retreat back to maybe Europe, for example, in terms of, and it's not just Lamborghini, I mean the entire motor industry, think about those supply chains going forward in this changing world?
On one hand side, you're right, but on the other hand, we are living because we act globally. No, we are never, let's say, flooding any market. So we are acting very carefully on how we do our business, and we are acting worldwide. We have a global presence. We have a very balanced distribution in the Americas, in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and also in the Asia-Pacific regions. And this is one of the, let's say, key elements for success. So for sure, we have our main suppliers coming from the European market, but we will always be open to have suppliers from all around the globe, and we still have them, and we will have them also in the future.
OK, and just very finally, Stefan, I was talking to Morgan Motors, a British brand last week, who were talking about electric vehicle targets, and they were asking the government to look at those again here in the UK. You guys are working on an electric vehicle, but I think it's not due to come onto the market until the end of the decade. Do you think the electric vehicle targets are too stringent, that maybe in Europe and elsewhere, government should be looking at relaxing them a little bit?
We always said that the first step of our strategy is to hybridize our lineup. And especially we have to keep the promise that every generation of new cars is more performing than the generation before, but in the same time, we have to reduce the CO2 emissions. This is something we will continue keep doing, but for sure, we always, if we speak about globally, the car market, there must be a match between the rules, the readiness of the public to buy, and let's say, and the technological capacity to deliver what everybody needs. So we need to have a car which is, let's say, on the price of the internal combustion engine cars. I'm speaking about the global market, not about Lamborghini. We have to have charging times, we have to have autonomy of the cars, and we have to have an infrastructure which is capable of, let's say, fulfilling the needs of the legislator, of the manufacturers, and for sure also in upfront of the car buyers. And on top of that, the source of the energy has to be sustainable. Other than that, it would be something which is not to be successful all along.
Stefan Wickelman from Lamborghini, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think, by the way, when I was asking him how much a Lamborghini would cost, I didn't quite answer it, but it's a hell of a lot of money, frankly, is the bottom line. Let's have a look at how the markets are doing this afternoon. Let's bring in Lucy Cootes, Investment Director at DM Fin. Lucy, as always, a pleasure. Let's start again with those interest rates decisions, held steady here in London and in the US too.
Yeah, basically, we're getting the same message from both the Fed in the States and here in the UK. They're both being cautious, and the rates are, as you said, unchanged. Now, the UK has avoided much of the direct pain from the US tariffs, but we're beginning to see signs of rising economic damage from that policy, and spending cuts coming in the UK, expected perhaps in the spring statement, and also the tax hikes coming in April. So Powell at the Fed actually admitted that it is uncertain, and we don't quite know what sort of impact these tariffs are going to have in the US. So that's why they're cautious. We're cautious for a slightly different reason, and that's more on the sort of darkening economic position here.
Let's talk about Nike if we can, a very familiar brand to essentially everyone around the world, but it's not doing very well at the moment. Pretty stagnant, isn't it? What's gone wrong with Nike?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think there are two main brands, and you know, asking colleagues in the office here, you know, it's a pretty binary choice. Are you Adidas or are you Nike? And Nike's fallen out of favour with its consumers because the previous chief executive was less focused on brands and he was more focused on volume. And as soon as you lose that sort of appeal in a design, you know, go back to your last guest on Lamborghini, you know, then you lose the value. And the new CEO, Elliot Hill, he's returned to take control. And there's a lot of hope on what he will bring to the group. Now, expectations are low going to the numbers tonight. So I don't think we're expecting any particular good news, but really what we're looking for is what ideas that Elliot Hill can bring looking forward.
OK, Lucy, as always, with the markets this afternoon, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, Lucy Cootes there. OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes are outdated ethical standards holding back the UK's investment in defence. We'll be explaining it all after this quick break.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything. It's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island. The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back to Sky News. We're just going to bring you up to date with the story that's been developing this afternoon, and that is that, of course, the former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is no longer under investigation by Police Scotland amid a probe into the SNP's funding and finances. We know that the former SNP chief executive, who is separated from Nicola Sturgeon, that is Peter Murrell, has appeared in court charged with embezzlement. We heard from Nicola Sturgeon earlier saying that she was completely in the clear, adding, "This is the outcome I always would have expected." Well, in the last couple of minutes, we've heard from the SNP leader, John Swinney, in Edinburgh. Let's have a listen into what he had to say.
Acknowledged, indeed, the fact that I have come into the leadership of the Scottish National Party is an indication that the SNP has faced very difficult times in the recent period, and that, of course, has been contributed to by the fact that this investigation has been underway. But I think what people will now see is that the court proceedings that are now live involve the possibility that the SNP has been an alleged victim of embezzlement, and that's obviously a matter that will have contributed to those difficulties that we have experienced. But what people should also know is that in my leadership of the Scottish National Party, there will always be the highest standards of governance and financial control in place to make sure the SNP has a very secure future.
For anyone who is making a donation to the party or supporting the party financially, can they be confident in that donation?
I think people know me well enough to know that I preside over the highest standards of governance and financial control. I was the Finance Minister of Scotland for 10 years and I delivered financial control for Scotland throughout that period. And in the standards I bring to the leadership of the Scottish National Party, that's the approach that will be taken, and I will constantly ensure that resources donated to the Scottish National Party to support our essential work to make sure that Scotland can become an independent country and to make sure that we can have successful election campaigns will be applied in all of my decision making and all of my activities and the activities of the party. And I think the fact that we now see the Scottish National Party, although having gone through a very difficult period which led to me coming into the leadership, is now leading the opinion polls in Scotland, and I think we have a very sound basis for optimism for the years that lie ahead.
There you go. That was the SNP leader, John Swinney, reacting to that news this afternoon that Nicola Sturgeon, the former First Minister, is no longer under investigation by Police Scotland into that probe into the SNP's funding and finances. That is it from me on Business Live for today. We're back, of course, tomorrow morning at 11:30. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is Mark Austin with the News Hour, including a press conference with the new IOC president. Stay tuned for that. I'll see you tomorrow. Very goodbye.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast. It's starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable.